basically in the 20th century, there's this idea that we can create a formula or a system or a technique. We can create something that will work in every possible situation. Well, guess what? You're dealing with human beings. So over time, this sort of chips away at people. That's why we call this the breaking of the family and not the downfall of the family. Because if you hit a rock enough times, eventually it breaks apart. And this basically is the result of, well, within the home, the families actually don't know each other. The only thing anybody actually knows is the images that they have of each other in their heads. The image on television not matching up to real life eventually starts whittling away at people. And the image on television actually also eventually gets whittled away at. The exceptional homes that reflect that ideal of the 50s start becoming more and more fewer and far between. The average homes start becoming less good to the point where it just becomes bland and tasteless and lifeless. It's not even sterile anymore. It's just bland, because at least sterile is clean. But we still have this attempt to pretend that nothing is wrong.
What are we drinking tonight, Ethan?
This is my Pinckney Bend whiskey, corn whiskey, made from the corn husks left over from the pipe making process of the Missouri Meerschaum Pipe Company.
Mm-hmm. An excellent option indeed.
A very, very good whiskey. The only issue I've ever had with it was, I think at some point, the first glass I ever had, you were here for this. The first glass I ever had, there was like a piece of actual corn or something in it.
Oh, really?
That got into my throat.
Okay, fair enough.
That's the only unpleasantness I've ever had about it. Otherwise, it's a very, very good whiskey.
That's so out there, though, that there's actually a certain charm to it. You know?
I almost choked myself to death on a piece of corn from my whiskey. It's great. But no, I'm not going to blame them for it. Something is always bound to... Every now and again, one bottle is bound to slip by the QC people.
Sure.
Which, by the way, that is a job I would love to have.
Just sampling.
QC sampling at a distillery.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Of course, a lot of people would get disappointed because my taste is not excessively refined, so I'd probably just sit there the entire time going, yeah, that tastes good. Yeah, that tastes good. At the end of the day, I was like, this is very good with me. This is really good. It's hot in here.
In other news, I gave a sampling of the Cask Finished Gin from Pinckney Bend to some of our mutual friends, Nate and Noah.
And their opinions of it were?
Nate's opinion was that it was good. Noah's opinion of it was, I'm paying down debt, but I would buy multiple bottles of that for my mom, and I would buy multiple bottles of that for myself. And yeah, we're gonna fetch a lot from you when you next make a run. It sounds like there's a Missouri, Dominic.
A trip to Missouri in store for these guys.
Perhaps so. More likely is that I'm just a runner. I am the modern moonshiner, driving 500 miles north after I make my getaway.
They're welcome to come and visit.
I could invite them. We could have a good time. So.
Southern hospitality is open to everybody. There's a song called, an old bluegrass song called Howdy Neighbor Howdy that is just how I view having guests. The chorus of the song is drive your wagon in the yard and turn your donkey loose. Kick the old hound out of the way, but watch the biting goose.
Okay. That is a vibe.
Howdy neighbor howdy, come in and sit right down. Come on, tell us all the news of how are things in town.
Mm-hmm. Everything else will sort itself out.
Come on in.
Hospitality is amazing.
My home is your home.
And you guys are very good at it, so that's one of the things I enjoy.
We're Southern Benedictines. You cannot have more hospitable people than that. Is Benedictines in the South, like the Clear Creek Monastery in Arkansas.
Okay,
it's a monastery of Benedictines that celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. Wonderful, wonderful monks. Like you can show up on their front door with nothing, and they'll be like, "Oh no, come in." Come in, eat, have dinner, sit down.
No, we need more of that in the world, so we absolutely do. For my own drink, I have returned for the first time since episode 1 to beer. specifically the Tales of Gold. That dragons.
Ah,
So Dragon's Milk Tales of Gold, their golden ale option.
the finest golden ale I have ever had.
Yeah, we both tried this at the same time when we last were visiting each other, and our reaction
I think we
was,
both had the same reaction.
ooh,
Which is,
yeah, that.
oh, oh, that is
Precisely.
good. And let me tell you, it is an expensive 4-pack. It's like $11 or $12 for 4 of them, but it is worth
No.
every penny, and it might even be worth more.
It's 16 to 17 for a 4-pack.
It was
They're
16 or 17, whatever it was. Whatever it was, it is worth every penny of that.
Agreed.
100%. There's a lot of times I'm like, nah, I'm not going to pay $10 for a 4-pack. I will easily pay 16 or 17 for a 4-pack of Tales of Gold. That is a spectacular beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like
we love
drinking
their regular
buttered
option.
gold.
It's
That's
a heavy
what it
beer.
tasted like. It's like buttered gold.
It's a heavy beer. It's an 11%, but that milk sugar in it, it's so good. And we love their regular stuff. We love their regular stout that they make. We're not necessarily sold on the Schmorz beer that they're offering as
Just
well.
on principle, I haven't tried it because it just
I know it's
s'mores
going to be
beer
good.
just kind of
Like I know it's going to be good. But I agree with the principle thing to a point. But you don't need to look that far. This is amazing.
like
Go
like
get yourself
sometimes
some.
two things don't need to be mixed together.
Mm-hmm. Also, just that label. That label cannot be beat.
It is
Perfect colors, perfect class.
like you hold it in your hand and you automatically start hearing Pirates of the Caribbean music start playing in the back of your mind. Like you pick it up and just automatically go, yo ho, all hands, hoist the colors high. Oh wait, what? It's that good. Or you start hearing dwarf music, which is sometimes what I hear. You
I
pick
would
it
also
up,
settle based on
down
the
in
colors.
deep where the dragon used to sleep.
I would also settle based on the colors for just like anything that remotely reminds me of High King Peter
Mm.
and the Chronicles of Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
So
He always had
wrong colors, but the same type of regality.
he did have the best drip. I'll say that.
Yeah, yes, he did.
The 4 Monarchs of Narnia, he had the best drip.
Fair enough. Speaking of drip, not the same kind of drip, but a terrible trickle down effect of all sorts of stuff that we've talked about in last episodes. We're continuing our mini series on the breaking of the family. This is the 3rd episode in that series, and we're just going to more or less pick up where we left off. Like we've seen the attention
we'll pick up
of the
kind of where
family
we left
split.
off in the first one.
Fair enough. We've seen the attention of the family split. We've seen society break the family in so many ways with so many tragedies. And we've looked at a picture of that in terms of the suburbs and the times leading up to it as, you know, the ideal that should not be the ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And we've given all sorts of reasons for that. But, you know, your dad goes and works in the city, so his attention is away from his family. The kids are at school or at camp all day, so their attention is who knows where, but it's not the family as it once was. Mom is bored out of her mind or dealing with this club or that club or whatever, getting big into gossip. So she's not paying as much of attention to the family. And it's just this fracturing that happens. And whenever you take something that's supposed to be together or supposed to be in its natural state and you stretch it and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, it just
It's that they
good
took the
things
credit
do not
card and they
happen.
started bending it back and forth over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Until eventually it snaps. And that actually didn't take very long.
True. So what would you like to add to that recap, and where do you want to go from here?
I will say, while the idea that was pushed forth, I fully understand where it came from. I understand there being this desire to have a sort of a systematic solution to what was perceived as what all the problems of history were beforehand, because this is part of the issue of the 20th century and the first couple of centuries before it. It starts in the Enlightenment, that academics, and once the academics start something, eventually it trickles out into everybody else. There's this idea that Everybody in the past was doing things wrong. And because now we have more knowledge, we have more education, and we have more technology, we're better than they were.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, in the 20th century, there's this idea that we can create a formula or a system or a technique. We can create something that will work in every possible situation. We can have something that is down to the most minute detail, exactly organized for the absolute best circumstance. Well, guess what? You're dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
Because that comes from a false notion that, oh, all of the problems in society are because people were just stupid back then. Everybody was just stupid, and all of the smart people convinced them to do stuff that was really bad, even though they all thought it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? We're now the most educated society in human history, and nobody knows what a woman is anymore.
Go figure, folks.
Like we had an entire presidential administration that would not use the word woman except to refer to specific people.
Yeah. And because they removed that from themselves at
And
one
half
point,
of them were all actually men anyway. So
at some point an attempt was made, I don't know by the administration, but somebody, to, use birthing people as a replacement term, which was
that
just
was funny.
wonderfully
Funny.
beautiful
Rand
in
Paul
all of
lit
the
that
horrible
guy
ways.
up.
Yeah.
Like, I think we'll just go with moms. That's worked for most of human history. How about we just use mom? That was funny.
And we wonder why, parents and people are just like, wait, do I actually want to send my kids to university? It's because they're not coming back smart. They're coming back stupid.
More and more people are going, I think Mike Rowe was right.
And by the way, we're not a bunch of rednecks saying this. We both graduated from college with 4
we both
degrees,
have college degrees.
But we went to an actual good school. So
there is this image in advertising and in television and in movies. Although television actually, in some cases, does a better job of painting something closer to reality. I know that's a shock, but television in the late 50s, in the mid 50s, actually did a half decent job of pointing out that people actually do have flaws, which you have to do in a sitcom, you have to do in comedy, because absolute virtue is not funny. But that's a discussion for another time. So there's this image, mostly in advertising, but also in a lot of cases in television and in film, of this perfect society, this perfect suburb, white picket fence, the mom and the dad and 2 or maybe 3 kids or dog. And real life doesn't reflect that.
No, it doesn't.
Because this is still people that we're dealing with. People have flaws, and it's not necessarily minor flaws that you sometimes see on television, where sometimes dad, makes a decision just a little bit too quick and winds up spending more money than he thought, or he sort of bumbles into one thing or another. Some of these are pretty serious. Like we've already laid out, a disproportionate number of men were broken by the horrors of war. So this pure, clean image that dad never loses his temper, and mom is rational and always level-headed and always keeps the family on an even keel, and the kids are all well-behaved and mannerly, is not accurate. It's a good ideal to live up to. I will admit this is, by and large, to some degree, what a family should look like. A father should not just lose his temper constantly. But a lot of fathers did lose their temper. There is a trope of the 1950s dad that just beat everybody around him for the slightest thing. Every little offense, off comes the belt. And not the open end either. Some kids got beat with the buckle end, and sometimes dad wrapped it around his fist. So that's also like the opposite end of the bell curve. That's like the particularly bad situations. The majority of families, I would say, were probably just like average. Um, Average being not what should be the actual average, which is a good, but most of them were just sort of blah. Dad just kind of goes to work and comes home, and the family has dinner together, but then the kids immediately go to their rooms and do their homework, and Dad just goes to his study to smoke his pipe and read the newspaper or something. And in the morning, Dad's got his face buried in the newspaper. It's just average and blah. That's the best way I can put it. That it's blah, and this is what the family is, and it's just sterile and lifeless. And when you decide to have time with family, it's, oh, I've taken off a whole week and we're going to go upstate.
So that's what the reality is. But to return to like the image that's being presented in TV as the ideal, that ideal that you talked about, I want to, like, you know more about TV shows from this time period than I do by a large margin. But what's the ideal that's being presented? Is it actually something clean? Is it something virtuous? Or is it everything should look this way because we think that's best? Like, is it virtuous or is it puritanical? That's kind of what I'm trying to drive at.
There are some cases in which there is something virtuous that is being portrayed. There are also some cases in which you can kind of start to see feminism taking hold. Because there are some of those shows where the dad is kind of a buffoon, and he sort of bungles around everywhere, and he's just a little bit full of himself. But mom never does or says anything wrong.
And we're not talking about like the Simpsons or anything. We're talking about
we're talking
well before.
It's to a much lesser. Dad is a bungling to a much lesser degree than like the Simpsons or Family Guy or South Park. No,
okay.
He's still for the most part, good man. He just sort of, I don't know. It's this idea that a man needs a woman at the end of the day to keep his mind straight, or to keep him rational, or to keep him from completely making a fool of himself all the time. Or the woman really knows better, but she just sort of sits back and watches him make a fool of himself. When she could be stopping him and speaking up, or she decides at any given time to teach him a lesson. Because
There's
of
a very insidious lie in there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's insidious and it's sinister, but it's a lot more toned down than it was much later on.
Sure.
So the basic form of what people think of when they think of the 50s, the one that comes to mind is Father Knows Best, where like that's one where the dad doesn't really ever do much wrong either. The Donna Reed Show is another one that's kind of like this, where, although the Donna Reed Show is a little bit different, so we'll focus on Father Does Best, where dad goes to work in the morning and he comes home in the evening, and the family all has dinner together, and kids go to do their homework or something, and then everybody goes to bed, and they get up and they repeat and do the exact same thing that they did the day before. I think most people think of specifically Father Knows Best because that was one of the most popular and successful shows of its time. And another one is The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which was actually a production of the entire Nelson family, which was Ozzie Nelson, Harriet Nelson, and then their sons, David, and the most famous Ricky Nelson, who was also a singer and is in the movie Rio Bravo with John Wayne. But I don't know. It's this. Oh, this is what life is supposed to be like. This is what the best possible life is for people. Like, this is what you should aim for. You know, dad comes home from work honey, I'm home. That sort of thing.
Which I guess ties back into the question I had asked, like, is this virtuous or is this puritanical? Because
to an extent,
because you're right, there needs to be a virtuous ideal. that we do need to put in front of people and say, like, you ought to strive for this. And like, we all ought to strive for it together. But the
Yeah.
key part of that is it actually the virtuous ideal? Is it the right ideal? Because if it's wrong, then this becomes a question of, well, it becomes a question anyway of by their fruits you shall judge them. Like, if it's right, great. If it's wrong, you don't really want to know where that's going to go.
So if I was to take all of the shows from the 50s and the 60s, which arguably the one that I picked started in 1960.
Okay.
So it's just after the 50s. If I was to take all of those family sitcoms and pick one that is an ideal, this will require some clarification. It would actually be My Three Sons, which, as I've explained before, is about this guy who is a widower and is raising his three boys with the help of his father-in-law, who is frequently referred to as the closest thing we have to a woman in the house. Because he does the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that comes from his experience in the Navy in the First World War. It is a very good and very masculine image. The one modifier that I would have to it is that it's actually like the last 2 or 3 seasons of My Three Sons, because closer to the end of the show, and this is mostly because actors, grow up and get older and eventually want to either go off and do other things, or child actors want to quit acting, pursue an education and a career and otherwise and whatever. They realize, oh, well, there's not actually 3 sons anymore. They're growing up. So eventually they have the father marry he gets married to a widow who has a little daughter. And she is actually like the best wife that I think I have ever seen in any sitcom ever. She is calm, she is reasonable, but she also actually submits to her husband, which is unheard of for 1970. For a television show in the 60s and the 70s, where dad is starting to be something of an idiot or something of a bungler, and mom has to tell him how to fix all of his problems. But I would say My Three Sons with a good mother is the actual ideal, because this father also has a profession in which, because I don't like the words career, I really don't, because that implies ambition, and ambition is not a virtue, it is a vice. That it's the biggest personality trait of the devil.
It depends on how you define ambition.
It does
but
depend.
I'm not going there right now. So
The first thing I think of when I think of ambition is like Emperor Commodus in Gladiator.
No one's arguing that's whether that's virtuous or not. So.
That's clearly vicious ambition.
Yeah,
but I would want to use a different word for it if we're talking about the virtue. But so the dad is an aeronautical engineer. Most of the time, a lot of the time, actually, he works at home. He's got a drafting table in his bedroom, so his sons can just sort of come in whenever. Like, if the sons have an issue, they come in and say, "Hey, Dad, can I talk to you?" And he immediately puts down his pencil and a slide rule and turns around and says, "What is it?" One of my favorite moments, mine and my wife's favorite moments, is the oldest and middle son are arguing, and they're having like a nasty argument, like it's about that far from coming to blows, and the dad gets between them and says, "Stop, go to your corners," and then he flips a coin and says, "All right, you start." I'm like, that is de-escalation, control, authority. There's another scene that sticks out specifically in my mind where there is,
and the fact, by the way, that he is not earned, because of course he has it, or he should have it, but that he has gotten the respect of his sons.
yes, because these two are, the oldest is finishing high school and the middle is starting high school. So these are 2 teenage boys who are on the cusp of being men. And this is at a point where just being their dad is not good enough anymore. You actually have to earn their respect.
Mm-hmm.
And he has earned enough respect between the two of them that when he says, stop, go to your corners, they both immediately shut up and back away. Not because they're afraid of him, but because they know that he'll make the best judgment. And whoever is wrong, whoever he rules against, will accept it graciously.
That is an image.
And
Everything we talked about with how teenagers are
this is Steve
thing.
Douglas is the name of the dad.
It's perfect.
He is my wife's absolute favorite TV dad ever. And I would say, just from an objective standpoint, he is probably the best television father ever. The best father ever on television. Because only once do I ever remember an episode where he was the one that was in the wrong and learned the same lesson he was trying to teach to his kids. But he is clearly the best father that I think has ever been on television. Steve Douglas and My Three Sons. That's easily the best family sitcom. Not because there wasn't a woman involved, but I think the fact that feminism was gaining ground and there wasn't a woman involved, there not being a woman involved helped because of feminism gaining ground. There's not an opportunity for feminism to sort of seep its way into the show. And by the time there is a woman, the dad's character is well established enough that it is going to sort of draw the ire of audiences if all of a sudden you make him a spineless weasel that's just going to do whatever his wife says.
Yeah. So it's a perfect countercultural show at one point, for its time.
At one point,
and still has lessons to teach us today.
All three of the original sons get married by the end of the show. All of their wives are excellent. Good women. And the middle son, Robbie, there's more attention on him and his wife. The original oldest son is sort of written out of the show at some point because the actor was 18 and maybe wanting to do other things. So it's just written in that he and his wife, they got married and they just moved to Arizona and he's got a career doing stuff out there. But when the middle son, Robbie, gets married, he and his wife get a lot of attention. And so it's very interesting. So you have a family where the men are prominent, uniting to a family where women are prominent because her father has passed away, I think. So her mother's a widow and she has her grandmother, and that's kind of it. And her grandmother is probably, even though she's only ever in like 2 episodes, is probably one of the wisest women ever to be on TV. Because Robbie and Katie get engaged, and after they're engaged, they have their first fight. And then because they had a fight, they suddenly decide, oh, well, now we're not compatible. We can't get married. And her grandmother sits them down and says, both of you shut up. Both of you shut up and listen to me for a moment. She looks at Katie and says, do you love him? And Katie says, well, yes. And Robbie says, do you love her? And Robbie says, well, yes. And the grandma says, then what is stopping you?
Sometimes it is that simple, ladies and gentlemen.
I would say My Three Sons is probably the best family sitcom ever on television.
Fair enough. So that's an example of a good show, and there's plenty of examples of bad shows. So how does the image of what people see on TV lead them? How does it affect the suburban life that we've talked about? Well, the suburban life we've talked about.
So here's what kind of happens psychologically. I should also say, just really quick, there are some that have managed to get through the first half of the 20th century kind of unscathed, and there are some that are able to raise their children well. It's the exceptionally good men, virtuous and strong men that are somehow, some way able to get through 2 world wars, a depression, and 2 outbreaks of serious illness, and with their psyche completely intact. It's a very, very small percentage of men that can do that. But they were there. So there were also like those who served in the Second World War, but in like non-combatant roles. And even in the First World War too. Like if you drove a truck in the First World War or something, in either World War, drove a supply truck. If you drove a medical truck, it was you probably saw some things that weren't great as you're carrying wounded. But, if you were a test pilot or a supply guy, or you were in the Seabees, which is the Navy's construction division, they're only armed for defense purposes if necessary, and have never really been involved in any major confrontation. Another place where the family was kept intact was actually from immigrants, from those who came from other countries where they still had that idea of family structure, the old ways of Europe, and brought those with them. Mostly the Italians and the Irish.
Mm-hmm.
More specifically, the Italians. The little Italian shoemaker on the corner.
Sure.
Because he's got his shoemaker shop on the first floor, but then the next floor above, this would be in the city. The next floor above is where he and his family live. And that's how that has been done for almost the entire history of families. You own the shop on the first floor, you live in the apartment above it.
I'm here for bringing it back.
And in some places in New York, it's still like that. It's like the family that owns the bodega on the corner lives in the apartment above it. But nowadays there are cities where some rich guy owns the shop, owns the building.
Yep.
And the guy that runs the shop and the guy that lives in the apartment above it are two different people. It's the guy that owns the shop comes in from out of town. And the guy that lives in the apartment above the shop works across town because that's, for some reason, the best arrangement.
That's what we end up facing.
And they just wind up filling the pockets of some excessively rich guy.
Fair enough.
There are good landlords out there, I have to say. There are good landlords. But it is best if you just sort of rent the house space and the business space as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we're picking an ideal image, I mean, that's far better than anything the suburbs can offer. Than anything that this century of misery and everything else that happened is steering people towards. So with that in mind, we're going to get on to what happens when you see that ideal on television and in advertising and in movies. Mm-hmm.
So this ideal that is put forth on television, let's imagine this on a bell curve, where like the middle of the bell curve is the most average people. The left side of the bell curve, from your perspective, is like the worst families. And then the right side is the families on television. Like the top 1% is the families on television. The bottom 1% is, the not so great families. So if you are in like the top quarter percentage living in one of those families, because the families on television did actually kind of vary. So they were probably in like the top 1% to 1 to 25%, we'll say.
Okay.
If you're in that percentile, if your family life is in that percentile, this doesn't really affect you.
I should clarify. When we say top 1%, top 25%, we're comparing them to the families on television. That's the height of the bell curve, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's like the far right end of the bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
So like that quarter of the bell curve, if you actually live anywhere in there, which families did, because to some degree, entertainment does have to resemble life to an extent. Otherwise, nobody's going to watch it because nobody can relate to it.
Yep.
If you were in one of these top 25% exceptional homes, then you were probably not at all affected. If you're in like the middle 50, it will say from like the 50% in between the top 25 and the low 25. If you're in there, you're probably seeing it and going, yeah, well, it's television. Life isn't really like that, but it's television. And you can probably accept that.
Mm-hmm. At least to a point. I have a thought, but I'm going to let you keep going.
And then if you live in the bottom 25% of it, you're like, well, that's not how life is. They're just completely making it up. Life is terrible. My father is lazy when he comes home. My mother is constantly shrieking at him like a harpy. And my entire life is miserable because they just both take out their anger on me. So the problem is that no matter where your family is on that bell curve, especially if you lived in the suburbs or in a nice neighborhood, no matter where your family is on the bell curve, everybody tries to make themselves seem like they're at the top. Everybody's the same. Everybody's perfect. Nobody has any problems whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you leave the house, put on a smile, put on a happy face. We can't let the neighbors know that we're having an argument. We can't let the neighbors know that anything is wrong because we have to keep our image,
Mm-hmm.
which at this point is the only thing that the U.S. is any good at in the last half of the 20th century is putting forward an image. It's all about the image with Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to make sure that everybody thinks we're okay. So even though dad beats his kid, the father beats his kids twice a day and uses a phone book because it doesn't leave bruises, we have to pretend that we all get along like the families on TV.
Well, that's the most extreme example because it's the bottom 25%. But that's
It's the
happening.
most extreme example, but even if our family is just average, where dad occasionally flies off the handle or loses his temper, and mom is just kind of upset and kind of a harpy, if you're just kind of average and blah, you are still trying to make it seem like you're perfect. Because that's what living in the suburbs is like.
I mean, even without going there, although I agree, if your parents are trying to do the best they can, but the image in their head is I need, in the societal example is I need to be perfect like everybody else. You can be a
Yes.
great family, and you're still going to be worried about it because your kids aren't necessarily dressed right or aren't, you know, they're
They're not
running
completely up to
running
style
around and
or whatever it is. They're running around. You're worried
things.
about who they're talking to and who they're encountering and yeah, all of that.
Yeah, and I would argue everywhere from the top 1% to the bottom 1%. I'd argue that this view has its influence everywhere along the entire curve,
Yes.
just in
Yes.
varying ways. So
It influences everybody along the curve, but I'm going to be listing the absolute worst scenarios
mhm.
or the worst case scenarios, which don't really come about until like the 80s, but
Mhm. Okay.
we'll just keep looking at this. So over time, this sort of chips away at people. That's why we call this the breaking of the family and not the downfall of the family. Because if you hit a rock enough times, eventually it breaks apart. And that's ultimately what is happening. And this basically is the result of, well, within the home, the families actually don't know each other. The only thing anybody actually knows is the images that they have of each other in their heads. And everybody alive has done this.
That's
Where
well
you make
said.
an
But it's
image
the
of
images
somebody
of
else.
somebody in their heads.
You make an image of somebody else in your head, and you decide that that's how that person is. Everyone alive, everyone who has ever lived has done this at some point. Because this is a natural human flaw. I've never known anybody that has not done this, except, well, our Lord and our Lady never did this because they were the only perfect human beings ever to live.
There you go.
And there's an argument that, probably St. Joseph never did either because he was too busy building things and digging splinters out of his hands. But everybody else that wasn't exceptional by being chosen by God for the sake of bearing and raising the Redeemer and the God man has done this. Where you don't actually know a person, all you know is the image you have of that person in your head, which is why it is a very bad idea to just lump a person into a box and decide that because you belong to this group, this is how you are and how I am going to treat you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the the thought that you can never actually know somebody's mind or heart.
And sometimes we get this as a society. Like, I mean, racism is a popular thing to decry, as it should be decried.
Yeah.
But that's only one example in a sea of them.
But
So-
we must also recognize that all stereotypes are true to an extent, especially the funny ones.
There's that, but that's its own thing. So
That's like a separate kind of issue. It's like we still have to treat people when we are dealing with individual people as individuals.
exactly, kind of like what we were saying before the podcast with how you can treat temperaments as horoscopes. Like,
Yeah.
you were a son
you're
or
a
daughter of
sanguine,
God.
so this is how. So that tells me all I need to know about you. No.
No, tells me something. But you're a son or daughter of God, fundamentally. That's
Yes.
the box.
That
That's
also-
the box you can be put into.
That doesn't need to tell me all that I know about you specifically, all that I need to know about you specifically as a person. That will influence how I treat you, because that will provide the minimum amount of respect that I have for you as a son or daughter of God, the minimum amount of respect that you are owed, no matter who you are.
Mhm.
But anyway,
This common flaw that we have.
so this family doesn't really know each other. All they know is the images that they've formed of each other in their heads, because they spend the majority of the day away from each other. And actually, they maybe spend only a couple of hours a day actually together
Yeah.
around the dinner table and interacting when you are, going to bed, and interacting when you're leaving to go to school, and the kids are leaving to go to school in the morning and dad's leaving to go to work.
And where are those images coming from? It's coming from, it ain't coming from the kids. It's coming from, what are the influences of society on you? Who are you listening to? Who are you consuming?
It's from this idea that this is how society is supposed to be now.
Yep.
Everything before this was a mistake. Real civilization really begins in 1950. We fought 2 world wars and now we're done. Except we're not, because now we're in Korea and now we're in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. But we're still going to,
which, by the
this
way,
thing.
Korea and Vietnam wind up sending more men home traumatized. Again, on top of having potential inherited trauma from their fathers. And Vietnam is particularly bad.
Yeah. Yeah, go, if you want another podcast to listen to, go listen to some of the interviews that Sean Ryan has done with Max Sog guys from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have a time.
Not just because of how violent it was, but the way that the logistics of the military was done at the time was just bad. So, like in the Second World War, you had your company that you were assigned to. And if you all made it out alive by the end of the war, you were all brothers. That's why that show is called Band of Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Because Easy Company started the war together and they finished the war together. And when they got out, they were brothers. They were one. It is a bond that is only forged by fire and combat.
Yep.
In Vietnam, you maybe spent 2 weeks with one company before you're assigned to go someplace else. We sent our entire military force over to Vietnam, and every man in that force was isolated because everybody is having different assignments. Everybody is being yanked around every couple of weeks.
That's a fair point.
So add that on top of
everything else,
the kind of things that were done to our boys and the kind of things they had to do to survive. Because no man can shoot a child that's carrying a bomb and not wind up a little bit messed up and not regret that for the rest of his life. No good man can do that. No slightly decent man can do that. And then when they come home, we have a whole anti-war movement in the United States. When they come home, they get off the plane, they're having rotten fruit thrown at them.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Being yelled at and insulted.
No.
When our boys came home from World War II, everybody cheered. They waved handkerchiefs. They threw their hats in the air. Everybody cheered because we had won. But then when our boys come home from Vietnam, because we just decided to suddenly pull out because the hippies decided that it was a bad thing, they got off the plane and they're treated like they're the bad guy.
Well, in case someone wants to play the unjust work hard, and being a objector and all sorts of stuff, fine.
We might have an episode on the Vietnam War in general, because I know the whole history of it anyway.
Sure. But in World War II, at least if you weren't going to cheer for the fact that we won, you could cheer for the fact that we came back, because that is a worthy thing to cheer for. And that's something basic that you ought to do. And in Vietnam, they've even failed that.
Some of the best advice, one of the best things that I've heard is, whether or not we think the war is right, we are still sending men to war. And it's not their fault. Whether or not the war is right is not on the men that are fighting it, or the men that are being used to fight it. So they need the 100% support of their families and of their communities going and coming. When they
Makes
leave
sense.
and when they return, they should be sent off with an embrace and welcomed with an embrace, because thank God you came home. You weren't left dead in a ditch with with missing dog tags.
Yeah.
You weren't remembered by a black flag in front of a government building. Because if I'm not mistaken, there are more unidentified bodies from the Vietnam War than there are of any war before it, except the Civil War. I might be mistaken about that. That might actually be World War II. But a lot of our dead are unremembered, and we're just left to die in ditches in that war. So men go over to that war, and they see that, and it is an even worse war than the First or Second World Wars for the individual American men involved. They go over to that war, and then they see that, and they wind up having to leave a man dying in a ditch.
So anyway, they come back from that, and this is nested in with everything else, but
this just compounds everything else. It's exactly the compounding of trauma that goes throughout the decades. But back to the family. The image on television not matching up to real life eventually starts whittling away at people. And the image on television actually also eventually gets whittled away at. It gets sort of chipped at.
Because it's not satisfactory, so.
It's not satisfactory, and people start more and more, people in Hollywood start more and more getting full of themselves, thinking they're artists and they need to show what's real. The exceptional homes that reflect that ideal of the 50s start becoming more and more fewer and far between. The average homes start becoming less good, to the point where it just becomes bland and tasteless and lifeless. It's not even sterile anymore. It's just bland. Because at least sterile is clean.
It reminds me of, if you are lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth. And in that, I mean, like, these homes, these families have been deprived of virtue. And what does that degenerate to? Well, obviously it can degenerate to evil. But in enough cases, like, people aren't going to go, at least right away, to the other end of the spectrum. So you end up in the middle, and the middle is this bland place. This what is actually happening type of place.
But we still have this attempt to pretend that nothing is wrong.
Yeah. Which means we have to change the ideal so that we think that nothing's wrong.
Yeah. So every previous fault winds up being passed on to the next generation, so they wind up compounding. And on top of this, we also have feminism and the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution, which technically began in 1952 with the introduction of the pill, when oral contraceptives first became a thing. So the 1950s, the sexual revolution of the 1950s is kind of like, and even into the early 60s, it's kind of like somebody just walking through a forest with a can of kerosene and just slowly pouring it out.
Yeah.
The late 60s, somebody lights the match. And everything goes up. Like, people start misunderstanding what sex is for. People start misunderstanding what the nature of the relationship between a man and woman in marriage ought to be. Homosexuality winds up becoming a greater thing. The hippies decide that, oh man, we just need to love and do what we want and all that. which really all they wanted to do was have sex and smoke pot and be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
They had like no high aspirations whatsoever.
Fun dad joke. They did have high aspirations.
They were the high aspirations.
They were the high aspirations. But I just go back to my earlier point about what happens when you take something good and you split it and you fracture it and everything else. You know, like things break and horrible things happen. You know, like an
So
image
here's-
is Bilbo. Like Bilbo was a good hobbit, and over time he becomes like butter scraped over too much bread.
Yeah.
Something is slowly pulling him apart, and he doesn't go fully that route. He has his couple scary scenes, but you know, he's a hobbit, and Tolkien is Tolkien, and Bilbo's still cool. So
Well, because
he actually
he's a-
makes the heroic choice, and he's fine. Most families are going to actually break in that situation.
Well, because he's a man that had an ordinary life thrust into a war, which also, you know, that did happen to Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin. They were just regular dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Sam is a gardener.
But again, this is fantasy, and these are people. So, and for our men,
Well, yes, but The
our-
Lord of the Rings is also the most true work of fiction that's ever been written,
this is true. This is true.
and the most accurate to humanity. It tells more about the human condition than characters that are so real. We'll get to that when we talk about literature. I have some things to say.
Sam.
So technically the sexual revolution starts in 52, but it really gets into full swing in the late 60s and through the 70s especially. Because it's this free love, and we want to have sex without consequences, and you know, abortion becomes legal in 1975, even though technically the Supreme Court had no right to do that. But you know, another discussion for another time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 1975. I think Roe v. Wade was 1975. Was it, or was it 1972?
Somewhere in the 70s.
It was in the 70s, and who cares? The 70s are
Yeah.
all kind of the same. It's just disco and rock and roll, and nothing good ever came out of the 70s. I actually can't think of a single movie that I know that is really good that's from the 1970s. But anyway,
I'd like to say my parents, but they came out of the 60s, technically. So.
yeah, my parents were born in the 60s too. So
Yeah.
it's like, other than a few people of a specific generation that were born in the 70s, I'm talking about ideas and laws and actions and things.
Yeah.
But so I forgot to mention as well, sometime in the latter half of the 20th century, I'm not quite sure what decade it is. I think it's like maybe the 80s or 90s. We start seeing subdivisions and cul-de-sacs, which are like the suburbs but worse, because they are more sterile and more bland. In some cases, more cookie cutter. Like, you can drive through a subdivision now, all the houses look the same, or every house is one of like 5 different floor plans.
As we've ranted about before, yeah. There's nothing inspiring about that.
Nothing inspiring. It's all brown or gray, or that stupid black and white that they have now. It's just blah. But
You drive to another town, you see the same thing. You drive to another
Yeah.
town, you see the same thing. And it's not one thing, it's 50 of them.
Yeah.
All everywhere.
it's
They've got their nuances, whatever, but especially in the modern world where you don't know your neighbors and you don't want to know your neighbors,
yeah.
those nuances don't even matter. The nuance is, what's the HOA fee? Is it 300 or 600
Yeah.
or 900?
Fortunately, I know the names of 3 of my neighbors, and I don't pay an HOA fee.
Props to you, and more props to you.
So through the 50s and the beginning of the 60s, somebody's going through the woods with kerosene and just pouring it out. Late 60s, somebody lights that match. And this is when we really start to see the decline of men. So, or the decline of everybody. We'll start with how men are. So the image of what a father figure is just gets more and more watered down to the point where the ideal is now the average. What was an average father in the 1950s becomes like, this is the best we got by the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't help that when your ideal is broken to begin with, then the broken becomes even more of the ideal.
Yeah.
So
like in the 50s, we still have, in some cases, dads who are, they at least still pursue good hobbies. They are they pursue like woodworking or blacksmithing or, some other kind of hobby. And they read, they have a study. You go and you smoke your pipe and you read, which is a good thing, and all men should do to an extent. But by the time we get to the 90s and the early 2000s, like everybody knows the image of a dad in the 90s and the early 2000s. He like runs out of the house screaming at the kids for getting onto his lawn, messing up his grass. All he cares about is the grass. He cares way too much about what his lawn looks like, which again is sort of a symptom of Americans caring way too much about images and everybody else's perception of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we go from dad kind of being an average guy, not that great, but not that bad either, in the 50s, to dad being a buffoon in the 90s.
Hence the Simpsons comment from earlier.
Yeah, The Simpsons comes about, and I think 1989 is when season 1 of The Simpsons start. And the creator of The Simpsons even actually said that his specific goal with that show was to undermine the image of the family of what the other sitcoms were doing.
And replace it with, well...
Because all the sitcoms of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, all like the regular family sitcoms, are really not that good. They're just sort of blah. There are a couple of examples, but it's just, they're just bland.
To return to another influence behind this, because we've talked before about how mom takes more control over the household because the dad isn't there to help.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes more her domain than their domain. So as time goes on, it makes sense that would only intensify. And if it only intensifies, then the dad is pigeonholed into, well, what do I have? Like, I get to play with my kids, but I need to, like, at worst, there's a tyranny to escape. And at best, well, I'm just not needed. So what do I end up doing?
Yeah. So whereas in like the 50s, men still probably had a study or a workshop. By the time we get to the 90s, he has the man cave. Which, by the way, no man should actually have, because calling it your man cave makes you seem like a Neanderthal. And basically, you're admitting to thinking of yourself as a Neanderthal, just living in a cave.
If you think of it that way. So, yeah.
There are only 2 types of men that inhabit caves. One of them is Batman, and the other is Neanderthals.
And no matter how much we love Batman, I don't know if you think of him as an ideal father.
I guarantee you're not Batman. I guarantee 98.5% of men are not Batman.
Oddly specific.
And that's being generous.
But no, it pigeonholes you into, I mean, the cave is a secluded place, so you get your spot over there.
Yeah, this is what my wife has allowed me to have. Yeah. I can have my man cave, and I can guarantee you every man cave also kind of just looks the same. Of what's thought of as like a man cave.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big TV. There's a couch. There's maybe a pool or a foosball table. There is a neon beer sign on the wall. And there are various pennants and jerseys and other memorabilia from the local sports teams or your favorite sports teams.
So it's
and a logo from your favorite car company.
It's all toys, and so you're a degenerate at heart. Compared to its precursor, its noble precursor, which is the study.
The study, which has a desk, a writing desk, and a reading chair, a bookshelf, maybe a radio, or a phonograph with records of good music.
It's a
That,
place
by the
for-
way, was also only available to the upper classes for a long time, and is another attempt by the lower class to emulate the upper class, because a man also doesn't necessarily need a study. He needs to study, but he doesn't need a study.
He doesn't, but like the difference between them is like
I don't have
this,
one. The closest thing I have to it is my office, which is a corner of my bedroom, because I don't have the place for it anywhere else.
The difference between a study and a man cave is a study is a place where you can talk about the merits of Chesterton and the nuances of economic policy. And the man cave is where you can scream, "That's not holding," at the top of your lungs.
Or if you happen to be in Europe watching this, you just get to yell at the ref for issuing the red card.
Yeah, exactly. And then go get another Heineken if you're there, Miller Lite if you're here. Because
see that, Englishmen? Some Americans do know a thing about soccer.
We do know some things, so.
Which it's soccer. Over here, soccer is soccer and football is football. Keep your mouth shut.
The only type of red card I'm getting is for Valentine's Day. So. But anyway.
And I'm married, so I have no right to make fun of you. But because the image of a father gets twisted, even on television, even if your dad is very good, because your dad is probably still at work for the majority of the day, and you only get to interact with him for a little bit at a time, you still wind up imprinting that on your father. And this also winds up twisting the idea of masculinity over time. And this is a degradation from the 50s to like the 70s and onward. So if we think of like the late 60s to early 70s and onward of what the image of what was masculine, like men are pretty much allowed only to be interested in sports, cars, hunting, and their lawns. Because, the man cave in the South has all the things that I previously discussed, plus a deer head.
And it's a combination of what is your domain versus what are the influences of society upon you. Like, what are the worldly ideals that are constantly being put forth in front of you when you're at the office and not with your family?
Yeah. So
it's all being screamed at you.
Basically, by the time we get to the 90s, the image of the man and of the father is, I go to work in my office, and then I come home, and my wife just yells at me and tells me what to do, and I just take care of my lawn, or I do stuff in my workshop, or I sit with beer and watch the football game, and yell at my kids if they bother me while I'm watching the football game.
Yeah, because I've had a long week, and how dare I be around my family?
Yeah, how dare my children speak near me if I had a bad day at work. So, but in the 50s and 60s, we have men who are still moderately intellectual, and they're still creative. They're still doing stuff. And this is their just genuine, their general portrayal. Not saying this was your dad if you're watching this. If that's when you were raised, not saying this was your dad. But I think to an extent we all see this. But men in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s are witless oafs.
That's a phrase.
I stole that from Loki. But anyway.
Oh, well.
I stole that from Thor: The Dark World, which is my favorite Thor movie. You can hate me if you want. But that's what you see on television.
Express your hate with a comment and a like and a subscribe.
That's what you see on television of what dads are like, is your dad is clueless, and all he cares about is watching the game, because it's never clearly defined what game he's watching. It just so happens that there's a sweet spot in which there is neither football nor baseball on.
What I'm about to say applies to women and children too, like in their roles in this picture, just as much as it does the men too. But for anybody listening, my dad wasn't like that, or he was kind of like that, but I'll extend grace to him. That's fine. Our point still stands. And
So was
it
mine.
just
I'm issuing the cartoonish. My
exactly.
dad was probably about like your dad was.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you're talking about the worst case examples as before, but it goes to show this is the point of me saying this, how subtle it is,
Hmm.
how much it is seeped into society, and how much good men fall victim to this in one way or another.
Where we just decided that, oh, the white picket fence and the 2-story house that's just the accepted norm now.
Yep. And everything that comes with it.
And everything before that, anything other than that is not good. And everything that came before we had that is just to be completely discarded.
Yep.
Those were bad, terrible times with all sorts of flaws. But there's no flaws with our time now. Everything is fine, even though everything definitely wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of like your property line, everything was definitely not fine in the 80s and in the 90s.
And as we said, not inside your property line either. But everything has to look fine.
Like I like to say, we had the gay 90s in 2 separate centuries, but they were both gay for entirely different reasons.
Yeah. I want the first one, not the second one.
I don't even necessarily want the first one.
Fair enough. Well, I want what could be conjured up as an image of it. How about that?
Yeah, I want people who are happy and prosperous, but I also want them virtuous. But
Yes.
I want people prosperous and virtuous, but if I can only pick one, I want them to be virtuous.
Got it.
So that's what happens to men, is that the portrayal on television does wind up, it's like by the time we get to the 80s and 90s, it's almost to a cartoonish degree. But to an extent, everybody's dad sort of does resemble that. I know that in some ways my dad did. I'm sure your dad did. He shared at least one quality with the buffoonish dad on television.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's the like every dad looks the same. But also, dads are watching the same shows, so they're seeing that as what they should be aspiring to.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Because they're still
yours
portrayed
didn't
as
like my
being
dad,
good dads.
even if yours didn't like your dad, I just returned to the ideal that is set forth as faulty. It's based on faulty premises from the beginning, and so that seeps in. So while I wouldn't say my dad had the elements of the buffoon necessarily, I would say that
Neither did mine.
exactly the larger faults of society are present there because how can they not be?
Yeah. In short, our father's faults weren't necessarily theirs.
Exactly.
They were the fault of the image that they were shown for their entire lives.
Yep.
That itself was not right.
Mm-hmm. And they're not equipped to study or to understand or to think.
Yeah, how were they supposed to know? They did the best that they could with what they
exactly.
had.
Can't ask for more.
Which that's the overall point, is that image is bad and should be avoided, and there needs to be a switch back around to the other end.
Precisely.
Like people are saying we need to return to the 50s. I say we should return to the Middle Ages, but we'll get to that.
In other words, the concept of going woke is not intrinsically evil. It just depends on your definition of the word woke.
Yeah.
The common definition, hell no. But for all of the obvious reasons that hopefully our listeners will understand without me having to say a darn thing about them.
Yeah.
But
our opinion to the order and nature, our opinion of the order and nature of society as it ought to be is probably the least popular, but also like the most based.
Exactly. So, and because it is based, and it is based in history and tradition and in goodness and truth and beauty.
You mean the fact that it's the way that society has been run for basically all of history until about 10 minutes ago?
Mm-hmm. We have to wake up to find it. So.
Okay, so anyway, that's what has happened to men, is that they don't. The study has evolved into a man cave, and that's basically the best way that I can describe the evolution of what the image of a man is in that century, in the last half of that century.
Mm-hmm.
So women don't have it great either.
Yep.
So in greater numbers, they start leaving the home. They're getting degrees and they're chasing careers. They're chasing promotions, which ultimately winds up that, as Michael Knowles says, they just wind up going to work in a widget factory for Mr. McGillicuddy. And they're not doing anything really fulfilling. And the women that are doing it because they have a passion for it and not because they're just getting paid and chasing a career.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are some truly wonderful nurses out there. And I guarantee you that you are overworked and underpaid if you're a nurse.
But when I look at it, a woman being a good nurse, I don't look at that image of worldly ideals influencing them in all of the bad ways.
Women also make
like
good nurses because they're designed to be mothers, and all of the qualities that make somebody a good mother are what you want in your nurse.
There you go. But when you talk about women just wholesale going into the workforce because, well, I need to, for whatever reason, like I need to pull my own weight too.
And by the workforce, we mean they just start going into offices, which means ultimately they just wind up occupying HR departments.
Mm-hmm. And I guess at the core of what I'm saying, for reasons that are not fundamentally about what is best for their family. Like maybe it is.
Yeah.
If you need the money, you need the money. Like you got to do something.
Like
but if
it's an absolute necessity, but most of the time you can live on one income.
Yeah. Is it for the flourishing of the family, or is it for the flourishing of the family according to the faulty worldly ideals that we talk about?
Yeah.
Are you working so the family can be brought together and fed?
Is it the idea that we need to have certain things?
So it turns out Disneyland is not a right.
Or is it this idea that, well, women are equal to men, so they should just be able to do all the same things that men do?
Yeah.
Which really is what it is for like the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. So also as a part of this, modesty just sort of gets tossed out the window.
Mm-hmm.
People pretend that the skimpy outfits of like the late 60s to the 2000s that women are wearing on television is some like misogynistic imposition on women, that men are forcing women to dress like that on television just so they can have some sort of pleasure in it. But that actually came about because women wanted to do that. They wanted to throw off the previous conventions, and that, at least for the last part of that in the 80s and 90s, that they decided that, oh, I should be able to dress however I want. And a lot of women are like this now. I should be able to dress however I want, and everything else is entirely on you. Because like the lack of modesty is, and this goes back to some of the earliest days of feminism as well. Like they had, in the 1890s, they had bloomers marches. You know what a bloomer march is?
No, but last time I asked a question like that, I've got an answer I didn't want. So
women would march down the street with signs and chants and whatever, and instead of wearing skirts, they just wore their bloomers, which was their underwear at the time. So it's nothing new, but like the degree to which women are wearing less and less clothes to make these points just sort of gets lower and lower over time, to the point where by like the 80s we have topless marches happening.
And to what points?
I don't know.
like how do you like forget what you know of modern modesty or the lack thereof, just, and everything that's preceded that, just come from the perspective of a normal human being and assess that situation. What's your reaction after the first 2 seconds? Why? That's the one word reaction, and it never need be elaborated on, because there's no reason. There's nothing inspiring about that.
So these ideas also get passed down from mother to daughter. Uh, so, and we see this nowadays too, where daughters they go to the store and they buy a skimpy outfit, and then a dad's first instinct is, no, my daughter's not going to wear that. But then moms start chiming in and they start speaking up, and they basically just shut the dads down and saying she can wear what she wants. She has the right to wear what she wants. Mostly that's just because the moms never had the opportunity to wear that when they were young. So they want their daughters to be able to do that.
Well, whether it's those
Or they've
principles
just
or
decided
whether
that, oh, she looks fine to me. And the dad is thinking, yeah, I know what a 16-year-old boy is going to be thinking when looking at her.
one of the beautiful things about women is that they like harmony. But one of the downsides about women is that they also like harmony. And you could say
Yeah.
1,000 things about this for men and women alike. So if if it's not feminist motives or whatever, it can very easily just be all the other kids at school are wearing it, and I don't want my daughter to look like the weird one.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
and I
it's
don't
the
have the man's
style.
brain, so I can't see why he thinks
And
that.
men
You
don't
know,
care. Men don't care what the style is. The only thing we care about when we leave the house is whether or not we're wearing pants.
but when it comes to assessing other people, we are visual creatures.
Yes.
So
Like, I realized that really quick when I started college. I grew up with one brother, not a lot of interaction with women or girls. Then when I started college and I hear a lot of the women complain about what it takes for them to get ready in the morning with their hair and their makeup and their clothes, and I'm over there going, I just want to make sure I'm wearing pants. That's
yeah,
kind of all I. That's kind of all I do.
hmm
But anyway, so feminism has also made women believe that because they're equal to men, they need to behave like their perception of men. Well, men are
yeah,
loud and crude and pushy, so I need to be louder and cruder and pushier. And to do a similar comparison like we did with men, so at least the image that we see of women in like the 50s and the 60s, they're calm, rational, they keep an even keel, and they help keep the
hmm
family on an even keel. But by the 80s and 90s and 2000s, they're passive aggressive and are always right, which we do see that kind of start in the 50s and 60s, but it's way more obvious in the last couple decades of that century, because it's like mom can never do anything wrong, never does or says anything wrong, and dad is always wrong, and the wife is always right.
there's a great song I heard called "Mother Knows Best." Oh wait, that's a villain
Oh
song.
wait, that's supposed to be toxic, right?
Yeah.
That's oh yeah, that's a villain song from a Disney movie,
hmm
which is one of the reasons that we like that my family my wife and I like Tangled in particular because of how
hmm
the villain is done. But
They did a great
another
job. Tangled is
another
awesome, but yeah.
yeah, another story for another time. So that's how men are affected, how women are affected. Here's how children are affected by all of that. Because every generation becomes the ruling generation. This generation's children are the rulers of the next generation. So how you raise your children determines how the next generation is led. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world, and all that wonderful thing, all that wonderful stuff.
So imagine a toxic "why did we learn children" applied to this entire generation of kids and their
Yeah.
18 years of upbringing.
So those who were raised in the bad homes and seeing that perfect image on television, those who were in like the particularly bad homes where dad was always angry and mom is a shrieking harpy, but when they leave the house they still put on that perfect image,
Yeah.
like they're just as good as everybody else and perfect like on television.
hmm
Those kids, because it's natural for a kid to think that everybody else's parents are just like his, as you think everybody else lives kind of the same way you do. Everybody says that, and it was kind of true for me growing up. Like I don't have any personal experience to change that. I don't have any personal experience to contest that. So the kids who are raised in the particularly bad homes, and see their parents just putting up appearances wind up becoming cynical. So when they see an actually good family or even an average family, they're like, well, they can't really be that good. They're just putting on a show just the same way I am. Everybody is just as bad as my parents are.
Just as another variation of the same thing, I recall this happening in like my circle of church families growing up. There was a mom who was complaining about, and I was present for this complaining. I was present for the dad's response. But just like, everything, like basically my family's a wreck, right? Because it's a family. There's always chaotic stuff going on. And these other families are all cool and awesome. And the dad's just like, I've talked to the dads. The same crap is happening. Like, it just goes to what's the perception versus what's the reality, and in that, what are the standards we're actually going to hold people to?
Well,
Is it this some fake ideal or is it the real thing?
And here's how I'll illustrate this. Well, I'll finish with the kids and then I'll do my illustration. So the kids who are raised in sort of average homes see the perfect families, and they just sort of are curmudgeonly about their parents not really being good enough because they know they don't really have it bad, but they maybe know somebody who actually does have it that bad. So they're like, I wish my parents were that good. And the ones who are raised in good homes, they either turn out all right. They're the few that are, they come to adulthood and are raised well and turn out okay by the end of by their adulthood. Or they grow up and they go to college, and even though their entire childhood they never saw anything wrong with their father, they go to college and other students and even sometimes their professors convince them that their parents were terrible because of X, Y, and Z. And it's not that misery loves company, because misery is incapable of loving anything. It's misery despises loneliness. The miserable want everybody else to be just as miserable as they are. And marriage winds up suffering too. So if we take like every year before 1950, and then every year, or 1960, we'll take every year before 1960. Now we'll go with 1950 because that's like the actual halfway point of the century. Every year before 1950, and then every year after 1950, and we look at the the divorce rates of each year. Divorce rates after 1950 just start shooting straight up. And there's this idea, everybody's perception of marriage changes. So it's always joked about, the wife being the old battle axe, or marriage being the ball and chain, or the ball and chain, or all that sort of thing. That's been a joke. But before about 1950, we actually everybody understood that was actually just a joke. Nobody actually very few people actually took that seriously. But particularly after the introduction of no-fault divorce into our legal system, and I'm not entirely sure when exactly that was, but I know almost immediately after, divorce rates just start shooting up.
Oh, no wonder.
No wonder, because I'm not satisfied. I want a new one. Men start having this idea because they don't understand that the joke is a joke. They think that the joke is a reflection of reality, which it's really not. But they don't see the joke as the joke, and they think that, my 20s, basically, as a young man, I'm supposed to spend my college days and all of my younger days I'm supposed to spend as just this wild, drunken frat boy. And I need to just, get laid as much as possible, have as much fun as I possibly can. And then eventually some woman will trap me and I'll get married. But ultimately, marriage is really just a scam that women use to trap a man, then come up with a reason to divorce him and take half of his stuff.
And you can understand why this would have become the perception for some. Yeah.
And it's fully reasonable, it's not reasonable, but it's understandable.
No. Yeah. That's the limit of grace I'm giving it. So
So, and that's the image that a lot of men have of marriage nowadays too, and that's why so many men are falling for Andrew Tate and for
Because at
Elon
least he
Musk.
stands for something strong.
He
Forget
at
what
least
it
stands for
actually
something
is.
strong, and he at least has this. He at least appeals to the natural tendency and the natural psychological and spiritual need that a man has to be a father.
Hmm.
But the problem is that he has done that by a harem.
Yeah.
He has a whole bunch of kids by a whole bunch of different women. And he's like, well, I support all of them, so I'm okay. Like, no.
Fair question. Horrible answer.
But anyway, that'll be another. At some other point, I'll come out swinging against Andrew Tate. But
He might be worthy of his own miniseries, honestly. So
he might. He might. We'll do one. Well, yeah, we'll probably do just the modern man. So men start thinking that you're wild until you settle down, or that marriage is a scam. But more and more, that wild period starts getting longer and longer, and more men try to settle down and not really want to give up their wildness. So that then feeds the marriage is a scam people, because these men don't want to be wild. They want to still, have some fun every now and again. So, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens at deer camp stays at deer camp. What happens at X place stays at X place. The only time a married man can have any fun is when he goes to a bachelor party and the stripper gets invited or gets brought in. And part of this is also due to the image that women have of marriage.
I
It's
assume they're seeing it in a similar fashion. Yeah.
both are equally at fault. So the wife starts thinking of marriage as, oh, you're either a slave to a man, so don't get married. Because why would I? I've actually heard these exact words come from a woman's mouth. Like, I have worked too long and too hard for me to just give half of it to a man. Like, well, you're thinking of marriage entirely the wrong way.
I'm not asking for half. I'm asking.
No, I'm asking for everything.
Yeah.
I'm actually asking for all of it. But so they don't want to share. Basically, they think that, oh, I am self-made, I am successful, I'm a girl boss, I don't want a man to push me around. Or they think that, they wind up just chaining themselves to a dead weight because this guy tricked them into thinking that he's wonderful, but then he, 20 years later, he's a fat slob. And again, I understand this because I've seen it, and I understand why some women would think this way. But this guy tricks her into being married, and then after they get married, he's not romantic. He's a fat slob. He goes to work and he comes back, and all he cares about is football. So she thinks she's chained to a dead weight.
Because he kind of is. Well, not kind
He
of.
kind of is,
He,
and
he
in some
is.
cases, he did. But I don't know, when that is already your perception in some cases, or when you have started to think that, you wind up imprinting that upon somebody that may not really deserve it fully. Because if maybe one day your husband comes home and he had a particularly bad day at work and he says, look, I just need to rest. I just want to unwind. Just please let me sit down and watch the football game. Even if this is the first time he's done it. If that image has sort of been imprinted on you, you might imprint that on him. And then that snowball effect starts from there. Or some women see this idea of, oh, well, I'm going to get married, so I don't really have to do anything. I'm going to get married and I'll just use my husband's paycheck to buy whatever I want. I'm going to get married so I can have an unending supply of money to go out and spoil myself. So I'm going to go and marry some rich guy.
I think given
And
the
again,
fact
there
that
are exceptions to all of these. Some women are perfectly good housewives. Some women are perfectly good working wives. Sometimes that scenario can work.
thankfully I got the wrong eye color, the wrong career, and I'm 6 inches too short to fit the song, and to have attracted these women to myself.
So that's how men view marriage, and that's how women view marriage. So children start seeing their mothers and fathers sort of talk about marriage and act out their marriages in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of them sort of grow up with this, well, what's the point? Well, why would I even get
Yeah.
married?
This is true.
And all of this over the last half of that century has led to what we have now. Divorce rates in this country have never been higher between actual married couples, not, the gays and lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
Although, ironically, the divorce rate, it's not divorce because it's not actually a marriage, even though divorce is not actually technically possible in a real marriage. But anyway, the separation rate between lesbian couples is like 78%.
Yeah, I don't know. Lack of compatibility doesn't help.
But for some reason,
There's a reason that
the
there's
separation rate in gay couples is like 22% or something like that. It's significantly lower. And then the separation rate and divorce rate between straight couples is like 50%. Granted, those numbers are significantly monkeyed with because everybody knows somebody that has been married more than once, or at least heard of somebody that, like, there's the trope of someone that's been married 7 times. It used to be everybody knew somebody like that. Like, oh, which husband is this? 7? No, 8. Oh, okay. Because it's people that are just not satisfied. So those numbers are actually monkeyed with. So the actual divorce rate among particularly religious people is probably less than 10%. But there are a lot of other factors that are monkeying with the numbers among straight couples. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. Between good Catholic couples would be crazy low. Crazy low.
Pretty much non-existent, actually.
Yeah.
If both the husband and wife are solid, practicing, believing Catholics, I would say the divorce rate, rounded to the nearest whole number as a percentage, would be 0. But anyway, we have divorce rates that are never higher. We have more people in 2 generations that are cohabitating than getting married. Because in both millennials and Gen Z, more people are just living together than are getting married, because why would you get married?
If there's an element of the ball and chain mentality that's influencing both the man and the woman ahead of time, like before they think about marriage, whether they're already in a relationship with a woman or not. I mean, doesn't cohabitation follow as like a logical middle ground? Like a logical, like kind of happy
we can
middle
just
place?
kind of live together, and then if it doesn't work out, we'll just separate.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, we'll just break up. Or like because people still naturally have this idea that marriage is something that is ideally for life, there is this mindset that I see where the cohabitation is the test drive. Like, well, we want to make sure that we can live together before we actually do.
Despite all the heinous problems with that. So
despite the fact, like, that is logical for one specific kind of logic. And that's if you see other people as a commodity that you want to test.
To basically say what you said, but kind of the way Jordan Peterson said it. Basically, you test drive a car. A woman is not a car.
Exactly.
And you shouldn't have to think too hard about why it would be a problem to view your woman as a car.
I actually saw this exactly in one of those man on the street videos recently, where the interviewer, I think it was a guy, asked this, what appeared to be a couple. It was a guy and a girl standing next to each other
Hmm.
about like whether or not you should sleep with a bunch of people before you settle on one person. And it was actually the woman who was like, "Oh yeah, definitely." And her idea was like, "Well, you want to test drive a car before you buy it, and if you don't like it, you want to get something different." And then the guy's response was, "Well, I mean, yeah, I could test drive stuff, but I know I want a Porsche, so why not just wait for the Porsche?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can test drive all the Toyotas you want,
Hush now.
but I mean, if you know you want a Porsche, why not just wait for the Porsche? Because you know that that's what you want, and
We're
you
gonna
don't have to test drive it to know that you want it."
we're gonna scrub out Toyota and put in Ford because I have a
Okay, yeah, we'll
Toyota,
say Ford.
and because Ford is appropriate for this
Toyota
miniseries.
and Toyotas are great. Ford is more appropriate, but like, and this is more like, especially in the modern day, men have a much clearer idea of what they want than women do. Mostly because feminism has just completely warped women's minds and told them that they want something that they actually don't.
Hmm.
But so, okay, so we have divorce rates that are never higher. Most people in two generations are cohabitating rather than being married. We have people having pets instead of kids. So even those who are living together are deciding, oh, we're dog parents.
Hmm.
And we have people not having kids so that they can have experiences. But when my wife and I were first married, there is a large section of social media that is run by couples that either don't have kids or only have one child that travel, and that is their entire thing. And these are people that have been married for like 5-10 years. And all they've been doing in this time is just traveling.
Hmm.
And seeing the world and having experiences. So you are replacing an actual family with either your pets or your experiences. I say it like that because that's all it deserves.
You
And
know,
I finally convinced my wife to stop watching them because it's like, how long have these people been married? Well, like 5 years. You think they should have a kid by now? You think they'd probably be happier than they actually are, even though they look like they're enjoying themselves,
and
if they actually had a kid?
they can't all be having fertility problems.
Yeah. Like, I know fertility problems are a thing, but it can't be all of them.
Yeah.
I know that they're a lot more rare than that. So this is also part of a symptom of almost nobody alive today actually understands what growing up is, what it is to leave your childhood or to transition from your childhood into adulthood. Nobody really understands what it is for a man to leave behind the things of a child.
As you said with the man cave earlier. Yeah. Just as one
Exactly.
example.
So we have the boomers who are the children of the greatest generation that went off to war. So they're the ones that are raised in the 50s and the 60s
Mm-hmm.
and somewhat into the 70s. So they have this idea that, oh, when I grow up, that means I get a job and I'm just kind of a boring person. All I'm allowed to do is like drink bourbon and smoke cigars as a grown man. Like those are the only hobbies that grown men ought to have. Gen X, who is their children, think that growing up means, oh, now I can drink and swear and have sex
Hmm.
whenever I want.
So the really edgy ones.
No, the edgy ones are the millennials because they think that growing up is losing your innocence and just being jaded to everything
Okay. Fair
and
enough.
realizing that life is truly miserable.
Hmm.
I have never met a single millennial that wasn't either completely jaded and cynical or like the most hippy dippy liberal person I've ever seen. Like it's all millennials just have this cynicism about them. I bet if we were to look at the statistics of men who were totally engrossed by all the conspiracy theories, like we'll just say that like if we have the statistics of Alex Jones viewers, I would say the vast majority of them are millennials.
I would know.
And you and I are on technically the bottom end of millennials and into the top end of Gen Z.
Yeah. So we're millennials that don't meet our own description, but that's a given.
We're
So
both millennials and Gen Z. We kind of understand both of them.
mm-hmm.
We have shared experiences with both generations.
Well, you can come up with good examples, just to use millennials as an example, and I'm sure you could apply a version of what I'll say to boomers and Gen X. Like millennials do have some reasons to be jaded, if you think about it from an economic basis and such. But when you're talking about growing up, when you're talking about maturing, you're not defined by the problems that you face fully. You're defined by how you treat them.
Well,
so we're seeing a case of dealing with it badly.
The two things that I see commonly in just how millennials think these days, two things that I see them thinking of as milestones on the road to maturation are losing your virginity and abandoning your childhood religion. Because, that church thing, that was something that my parents made me do when I was a kid. But I'm not going to do that now because I'm grown up and I know better. Which it's, again, this idea. So this idea that people in the past were stupid and don't know any better is now a generational thing. Every generation thinks they know better than the one previously.
Yeah, it tends to happen.
And ultimately, by the time that I would say most of Gen Z, so our generation and those who are a few years younger than us, have just refused to grow up, period. So we have 3 generations that don't really understand what growing up actually is. Boomers having the closest thing to a good idea, because it at least involves responsibility. But with the way that Gen X and millennials view growing up, we then have Gen Z just refusing to grow up in the first place. Because that's the examples that they have. And like, why would I want to do that anyway? And we can even see this now. The majority of people who are going to Disney World and Disneyland and Universal Studios are in their 20s and 30s without children.
Is that actually the case?
It's a disproportionate number.
It's disproportionately pathetic.
Yeah.
So
it's sad. So Universal just recently, earlier this year, unveiled something that actually my wife was also really excited about, and I thought it was kind of neat too. But Universal Studios has, I forget what it's called, but it's basically like a giant courtyard and then with 5 separate worlds that you can step into.
Okay.
So they have the Universal monsters being one of them. So like Dracula, Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Wolfman. That's one of those worlds. They have Super Mario World, because for some reason Universal has those rights. They have How to Train Your Dragon, because Universal and DreamWorks are together. They have a Harry Potter world, and then I think they have one other that is unique to the park. But when they were first opened, there were videos popping up online of like the grand openings of when those ropes were first let in, and the majority of the people that you can see in the crowd are grown adults without children. It takes like 2 or 3 minutes before you even see a single child.
Yeah, that does not seem fitting.
Like, that is not for an adult without a child. Like, I get if you liked Harry Potter growing up, you might want to go and see the new Harry Potter universe world thing at Universal Studios. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But part of growing up is seeing your enjoyment of a certain thing, your enjoyment of what you had when you were a kid, changing to the enjoyment that you have when your children view it for the first time. or when your children experience that thing. I really enjoyed Harry Potter, and now my kids get to enjoy Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
It's that sort of feeling.
Yeah. You can say it's fine for an adult to go, but it's reasonable to just leave it at the majority of people there should not be adults without children.
And it is a higher feeling than just the feeling that you got from enjoying the thing in itself, because
Now you get to share it.
You get to share it. It's something that you still do actually enjoy as an adult, but you are also seeing your child enjoy it. And that enjoyment is magnified by your love for the child.
Exactly.
Like when my son gets super excited when we watch Transformers cartoons and Optimus Prime does something cool.
Yeah.
My son is 1.5. He loves Optimus Prime. And I could not be happier.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law bought him little Captain America socks. They're the cutest thing on him. Mostly because he's like a broad-shouldered, blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid, and he looks like Captain America.
So,
but they're like the cutest thing on him. He's got his little Spider-Man pajamas. Because that is, it's adorable.
yeah.
And I love it. And even though my son is like 1 3/4, 1 2/3, whatever it is, his birthday's in February, so it's like 1.5 or so. I enjoy whatever it is he's enjoying that much more because he enjoys it. So basically, we just have childless adults who fill their lives with selfish things nowadays.
So boomers think growing up is getting a job and such. Gen X thinks it's drinking, smoking, having sex, swearing. Sorry. Well, all of the above.
Maybe swearing, maybe,
Yeah.
Smoking pot, although that's more of a millennial thing.
Yeah. And the millennials are
Although Gen X also smokes a lot of pot too.
losing innocence, just being jaded. Yeah. Curmudgeons in one sense, I guess. And Gen Z is who the hell cares? I got nothing to
Like,
live
why
for.
would I grow up in the first place?
Yeah.
And a lot of millennials have also just sort of refused to grow up. But millennials also have this... The millennial sense of humor is just disgusting. It's just... They want to distort something that's good and then laugh at that. Like when Burger King had the emotion meals for adults. Do you remember that a few years ago?
No.
It
I
did
know
not go. It didn't go well, but it was basically an attempt to try to appeal to millennials. It was like, and their ad for it was literally, because we're not happy all the time. So they had like a different meal for like 5 different moods that you could be in. They had like a happy, but also a sad, and also an angry. And that only lasted for like 2 months, by the way, and then they stopped it. I don't know if Burger King is still doing that, but it was like, I think they just got roasted so hard by so many people that enough people at least had enough sense to look at that and go, yeah, that's dumb.
Even though there is an edgier generation that we listed, you can understand why I called them the edgy generation.
Yeah. That's kind of what Gen X and millennials wound up doing growing up, was just making cartoons say bad words. It was making the things that they remember as kids say bad words. They think that adult means swearing and sex and drinking.
Yeah, which says something about the standards under which they may have been raised and the norms that were preached as good and whatever. So,
yeah,
which ties back into stuff we've talked about, but
and then they just decide that
this?
Those were all bad, so we're going to do something completely different, and they just never take anything seriously.
No,
everything, including life, is just a big joke to them. And millennials, we have disproportionate number of millennials that will watch a movie and identify with the villain. The edgy millennial guys think the Joker is right. And we have a friend that's the closest thing we know to an edgy millennial guy.
he's fine. So,
but he's fine. He's the closest thing we know to an actual edgelord.
There's a way to mix there's a way to mix these things properly and I'm going to
Mhm.
be a complete arrogant person and propose myself because I'm a mix of Faramir and Wayne. And if you know the series we're talking about, you'll understand what I mean.
I have more right to Faramir than you do because I actually have an older brother
Quiet.
that got more attention than I did.
You are my honorary older
I
brother. How about
actually lived in my older brother's shadow for a while, so thank you. I have more right to Faramir than you do.
whatever? Whatever.
Also, I'm the one that's married to a shield maiden, so
I'm working on that.
anyway.
So how do we bring this home? How do we sum up? Because we've just gone and gone and gone and gone as we can because there's so much material about, yeah, even more that's broken the family,
Well,
even more that's stretched it.
first I want to say that I have laid out most of the worst case scenarios and just the worst that I see because I guess I'm I guess part of me is a pessimist at heart and I just see the absolute worst and do everything that I can to avoid that by being as much of the opposite as I possibly can be. Uh, I see the absolute worst case scenario effects that some of these things have had. But
Enough. So where do we go with this next time?
well, I think we'll try to be a little bit happier next time,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll try to present a more hopeful image for the future of what at least you and I would like to see, where we would like to see the family go from here.
Unlike plenty of jaded folks, we're not going to come with a problem. We are coming with a problem and a solution. So,
Mm-hmm.
and there are quite many problems that need quite many solutions. For that and everything else, we'll see you next time.
Have a good night.